Yeah, thank you very much. I will talk about how our decarbonization commitment at Maersk and how we see how we will get to achieve our targets and the role of government and regulation in that regard. Next slide, please. Yes, first, a very quick introduction to Maersk. Maybe some of you know us. We are traditionally known for our shipping activities, large container shipping company, but we are also more than that. We are also a global logistics company providing intermodal transport services. We have a number of terminals and warehouse capacity worldwide, but it is indeed our ocean part is indeed a large part of our business, and approximately 16% of containers moved in the world are with us. Yeah, so that's a quick intro to who we are. Can I have the next slide, please? So at Maersk, we have set ourselves an ambition to have a net zero emissions in 2040. So we consider that rather ambitious, but we think that's needed in order to drive decarbonization. We also have a number of intermediate targets. For instance, that we'll have 20% of our cargo transported on green fuels in 2030. Yeah, so that's, and then the very big question is how do we get there? Can I have the next slide, please? Because we think there's a you can push forward to, we have all 4 elements there that are needed to reach our ambition, namely to, of course, design new carbon neutral vessels. It's not we don't see it we don't see possible to retrofit to all new fuels. We will need new carbon neutral products, and of course our customers demand for carbon neutral shipping is key here, and we see this demand increasing significantly these years, and that's of course a very positive and important driver of this. Then we have what's important today, the new fuels, of course, and then finally the push for new regulations is an important fundament. Can I have the next slide, please? So the new fuels. So as was mentioned previously, we have one of our sort of short-term fuel beds is green methanol. We have ordered in total 19 vessels so far. The first one is a small feeder vessel, which is built and is going to be delivered in a few months, actually, and operating later this year. So we are very excited about that, and this vessel will run on green methanol. And then for the next order, we have a number of large vessels being delivered in 2024-25, which is around 15,000 TEU. So those are rather large ocean-going container vessels, which can also run on green methanol. Then there are other questions about methanol versus ammonia, which is of course also something we have looked very much into here at Maersk. And I think I would say I agree with previous answers in that regard. I would also say it's a timing question, that green methanol is here now. We have the technology, we have the vessels, we have the fuel. Of course, there's a question of the scalability and the volumes needed. That's another question, but that's an option in the short term. Whereas ammonia, there's still a lot of outstanding questions on safety, on toxicity. NOx was mentioned in the chat also. We're fuel agnostic at Maersk, and we're looking at all options we can think of, and green ammonia is definitely something we're looking at, but will be for the somewhat longer term, as is also on this slide. So as I said, green methanol is what we're working with now, this year and the coming years in the short term. Then the big question is how we're going to source this fuel, and by announcing the vessels, ordering the vessels we did, and announcing our green methanol strategy in 2021, we took a huge risk because we did not have the fuel at that time. Fortunately, since then, we have been able to source fuel from various places around the world. And I can have the next slide, please. Yeah, there you go. So these are some of the partnerships that we have closed on green methanol, and as you can see, it's a variety of regions, which also demonstrates the potential for green fuels production around the world. And we're also working with governments on exploring possibilities for fuel projects, as you can see. There is still some way to go. To give you an example, it's our estimate that the annual global production of green methanol in 2022 was 30,000 tons, and in 2025 at Maersk alone we will need something around 730,000 tons. So we really need an acceleration in production of these fuels, and that is also what we see now with these partnerships that we're close, fortunately. However, as has also been mentioned previously, an important element in really securing the green transition of shipping is also regulation. And can I have the next slide, please? Because the International Maritime Organization is a key in this regard. For us, of course, global regulation is important as a global industry. And this year, the IMO is going to adopt its final strategy on greenhouse gases. So can I have the next slide, please? Yes. So among other things, we hope for the IMO, as I said here, to agree on a high ambition this July when they have their MEPC meeting, which is for us, the IMO should have an ambition of at least net zero emissions in 2050. Moreover, we hope for a carbon levy to close the competitiveness gap between green fuels and conventional fuels. Also, we believe that we have to have a well-to-wake perspective on the fuels, so that we don't only look at the greenhouse gas, the CO2 emitted from the vessel itself, but look at the entire life cycle. Also, it's important to include not only CO2 but other greenhouse gases like methane. And then finally, we see many initiatives from the US and from the EU, which are very positive as we see it. However, we do need global regulation. So that's why we think the IMO is very important, and we hope that India, as a key member state at the IMO, will contribute to to a high ambition this summer, which will hopefully be historic for shipping. Yeah, so I think that was my what I had to say. Maybe just a note on also the question that has been on whether hydrogen can be a green fuel for shipping. And I think as I can just repeat, we have also of course looked into this, and it's the same response that there's some storage issues and so on. So we don't see hydrogen as a direct fuel for ocean going vessels. Perhaps for smaller vessels or for short sea shipping. But of course, as we go with green methanol, we're also going to need hydrogen. So we see the hydrogen-based fuels as the solution for ocean-going vessels. Yeah. So
good.
Thank you for your time. Yep.
This sounds all a big talk to you. So thank you, Son. So yeah, I have got many immediate questions. But thank you for telling us. 30,000 tons of production today, and Maersk needs by 2025 750,000 tons of methanol. That's like a massive, what is it, 25 times increase. So thank you for sharing us really how you're really going about sourcing. I mean, that is a massive change. So that gives you, of course, massive then supply chain difficulties. Make sure that you get the methanol where you need it, because you don't need it one place, you need it all around the world. Fascinating. So I'll thank you also for many things. The tax 150 is quite high. I mean, currently carbon is at 80, so you're asking 150. That's already an increase. And also your ideas really also in a well to wake, which is important because I had one participant ask me about the scope 3 emissions. Currently, IMO is only focused on tank to wake, but it is the well to wake approach, so where the fuel comes from is important. And so I think that's greatly appreciated. I have still so many questions, so I think I agree with you on the physics. So it's not just a space issue. What people don't realize, hydrogen, just to add on, has a boil off of 1% per day. So if you have liquid hydrogen, if you're on a container for 100 days, your hydrogen, what happens then? That is the question that will come up. But we had other questions for long distance. We had one question here, green corridors. I'm gonna have to skip. We had a question here, which company is building the ammonia and methanol vessels? So ammonia, just for everybody to know, is still being licensed by the IMO. That's why nobody's building it today. But who's building methanol vessels? Methanol powered.
Yeah, well, ours are delivered by Hyundai in South Korea. So yeah, I'm not sure about ammonia since we don't have those yet. But yeah, and I'm sure there's more places around the world, but that's at least what we have from our methanol side. Yeah.
Okay. Somebody's also asking, does Maersk have strategic plans for collaboration on green ammonia?
Strategic collaboration. I think, you know, as I said, we're looking into this. We're participating in several projects to explore, of course, all areas about ammonia, the safety aspects, the environmental, the technical aspects, and so on. So we do not yet. It's so early stage that it's not as mature as methanol, as I mentioned. Where on methanol we collaborate, as I mentioned, also with some governments and so on. But again, ammonia is definitely also something we're working with. However, for the longer term, and it's not as mature as methanol. So yeah.
Yeah. So I'd agree. It takes time because we're still in the process of testing and licensing ammonia. But still, somebody challenged me, why ammonia for big and long, and methanol for medium and distance and weight?
That's not, I think, how we see it necessarily.
Okay.
I mean, I think for us, first of all, it's of course you can say In the end, ammonia has more prospects as a zero, at least almost zero emission fuel than methanol, which is close to zero, perhaps in a good case 90% reduction in emissions. But I think again, for us right now, it's a question of timing rather than focusing on the distances on the use of other fuels. For us, I mean, we have ordered, as I said, large container vessels, 15,000 TEU, which is rather large container vessels, so they will be going also on the longer distances, is the plan, I believe.
Yeah. So the challenge with methanol, I mean, perhaps you know better, for me was the carbon, because with methanol you lose carbon. So unless you capture carbon through direct air capture, it's basically you're delaying the emission of carbon rather than avoiding it. That was for me the key argument. And ammonia is really the zero carbon, which is why for a bigger, longer, heavier, where you have definitely more emissions, you would use more ammonia. That was my logic. But if you know how to capture the carbon.
Sure. I mean, it's not, as I said, it's close to, it can be rather close to zero methanol, but ammonia is closer to zero for sure. Yeah.
Okay. I have another question. Again, so we're getting to the fuel discussion. What is the, let's see, let's get it. What is methanol price as a fuel, and how is it competitive with traditional fuel? So is methanol already competitive, or does it need some kind of support?
Yes, well, that's a big question, right? Now there is what we call a competitiveness gap, that green fuels are 3 to 5 times, I believe, more expensive than traditional fuel. So that is an issue, and that gap should of course be closed, among other things, by also a carbon price, and that would help with that gap. And that is why we say there's many different opinions about what the carbon price should be. Our calculations say that if you put $150 per ton CO2, which is then probably around $450 per ton fuel, that should more or less close the gap. But there's also different numbers, and I think we're open to that discussion. So it's not so much that it has to be that specific price, but we think that price gap should be closed also by initiatives like, for instance, the IRA in the US that has different support mechanisms and so on. But yeah, a carbon price is an important element in that. So that's what we hope the IMO will progress on also. Yeah.
Okay, good. Let me move on. So we're wrapping up. We have many questions. I can't ask all of them. I do need to ask, we still have another speaker. We're rapidly running out of time. So thank you, Sana. Thank you for joining us and sharing your views and really on the practical issues.